Here we are, guys, once again with another things I didn't review video. It should be the 7th installment if my count is correct. For those of you who don't know, even if you do know, I'm going to go ahead and just lay out what these videos are. This is a recap of everything over roughly the past few months that I have watched and listened to that I have not reviewed. This includes movies, television shows, albums, mixtapes, EPs. The video is going to be structured by category. It's going to go in order from albums to EPs to mixtapes to movies and then to TV. You'll see in the description box below, I'll have all the time codes listed if anyone wants to skip around. And I ordered them in order of the release date that each one of these things came out. These are just my quick thoughts on all of this stuff. I'm not giving a proper review or rating, score, whatever you want to call it. Each of these shorts should be approximately 30 seconds to a minute long. Just recapping how I feel about whatever I'm talking about. I believe that is it. This should be coming out to January 1st, 2023. So Happy New Year in advance to anyone watching this at the time. Hope you guys like this video. Obviously, feel free to skip around. It's going to be a long one, really long one. Even without me doing this intro and outro here, it's already going to be super long. So skip around as you please and enjoy. Well, this is kind of embarrassing. I listened to this new album by Viagra Boys called Cave World, like around the time it came out in July, but I just forgot to film a reaction to it, so I'm just putting it in here. This is a cool album, cool mix of dance, punk, rock, electronic elements in there. I don't think it always works, you know, like a lot of albums, sometimes it just doesn't always work all the way through, but for the most part, this was an enjoyable experience, and yeah, I think this is just a really unique band. They have a cool sound. Multiverse, this is a new album from Wiz Khalifa, and I was, I think, a little bit pleasantly surprised with it. I didn't really like it that much, but honestly, like, it was okay. I think Wiz came through with some interesting writing here at times. I liked how open he was about his religious beliefs. You know, I mean, I had my opinions on that stuff. I have my agreements and disagreements, but you know, I don't like to spew too much into that. I liked that he was open about his feelings on that stuff. I think it has enough diversity in it for people to at least enjoy one song out of it. With this new album by a collective soul called Vibrating, I would say I liked it most when it seemed like the band was kind of outside of its comfort zone. A couple of tracks on here I did actually like quite a bit. It sounded pretty different from what I'm used to hearing from them. And normally I would see these types of songs as sounding a bit generic with the genre that they fit under. But in context to this album, they're kind of a breath of fresh air because the rest of this album is very safe, very by the numbers, alt-rock, post-grunge stuff. So unfortunately, it's not really something I ever want to listen to again. Chaos and Bloom by Goo Goo Dolls, big band, famous bands. Band with lots of hits, band that has some songs I do like. I don't mind this band overall, but I really did not like this album. I really didn't care for it. And the thing is, there were several moments on this album that I thought were pretty well done. And as I was listening, I was thinking like, okay, this isn't bad. This is kind of decent, but it just feels empty. There really isn't a whole lot of substance to this project as a whole, and not much else to even really remember or get a valid review for, which I guess is why I'm here right now. Physical Thrills by the band Silver Sun Pickups. I will give it to this album. It has a pretty consistent sound and tone from the very beginning. From the first few tracks, you pretty much have an idea of what you're getting into for the rest of the listen, and it commits to it. It's a consistently sounding album and it has a consistent vibe to it, if that's making any sense. And so I gotta respect it for that, for at least, you know, clinging on to its ideas and its aesthetics that it kind of sets up at the beginning. But unfortunately, a lot of this did just come off as bland to me. Production side of things, the instrumentation side of things, the lyrics side of things, just it all kind of coalesced into this big feeling of meh. And overall, I can't say that I cared for this record all that much. In Loving Memory, a new album by Black Bear, I damn near hated this thing. Hate is not usually a word I like to use that often. I think it's a very powerful word and I kind of use it selectively. And this album didn't really anger me. It didn't make me like so mad and frustrated. So I can't quite say that I hated this, but man, this was awful. The only really kind of redeeming thing about it is that it's got Travis Barker playing drums, and he's a fantastic drummer. There's no denying that. Incredibly talented at what he does, but unfortunately it also has Travis producing a lot of this, and I think he's much worse in that lane personally. But honestly, even the lackluster production is like probably the 4th or 5th thing wrong with this album. Black Bear himself, I think, is just so uninteresting on this whole listen, with his vocals, with the words he's singing. And it's safe to say at this point that I've had enough of this generic pop punk revival trap kind of stuff. It's not for me. Black Vladimir by Mayhem Lauren with Derringer on the production side of things. This reminded me a lot of Tana Talk 4 earlier this year by Benny the Butcher. Had kind of a similar style of these chill, slow, steady moving beats. A lot of boom bap influence in this one as well. And I think it's cool, and I think it does mostly work here, but also I think it can suffer from just being kind of one-dimensional and a little bit bland at times and kind of predictable. You can kind of tell, like, all right, this is going to kind of follow this structure and this format here in terms of the instrumentals. But it was, I think, mostly an enjoyable experience with some really notable tracks and features from the likes of West Side Gun and Conway the Machine delivering some really nice contributions here. Age, Sex, Location by Ari Lennox. This was a cool album. I like Ari's singing voice quite a bit. Lots of nice, smooth R&B tunes going on here. I guess I wish that the subject matter was a little bit more diverse, because a lot of it revolves around relationships and sex. And I get it. I get the appeal of that. Nonetheless, though, I mean, still a pretty enjoyable light album, and probably one of the better R&B influenced albums that I've heard all year, honestly. It's really solid, really consistent. Jude by Julian Lennon, I think, has a few very impressive songs, some good lyricism here and there, even some unorthodox production at times. But unfortunately, these standout moments are so standout because the rest of the album is very forgettable, very by the numbers. Bjork's new album, Fossora, I think is not quite as boundary pushing with her interpretation on pop and alternative music as a lot of her other stuff is, in my opinion. But at this point in her career, I feel like it doesn't really need to be. I feel like she could just make an album like this, continue to do her thing, do what she's strong at, and it's good enough. And I think this album is really a perfect representation of that concept. I like this new album from Freddie Gibbs called Soul Sold Separately. Thought it was really solid, a cool mix of different styles, different subgenres of hip hop. I guess I just wish there was more about it that felt kind of unique. I can't say it's exactly a standout rap record to come out this year, but it's really enjoyable. It's consistent throughout its track listing. So I don't really have much to complain about other than, you know, maybe just kind of go a little bit more outside the box, but it still, I think, was pretty good for what it was. The End So Far, I think, is a record that works really well at times when Corey Taylor taps more into his Stone Sour-ish side of writing, kind of embracing more of a balladry formats. In particular, the first leg of this album, I thought was really good, really solid. It was promising. I liked where the album was going. But I gotta say, it really does tank pretty soon after that. The band just feeds way more into its alt metal and new metal tendencies, and not in a good way. This is actually some of the most safe and uninnovative material to date. So it kind of left me off on a bad taste, which is unfortunate because I did like where it was going. Unfortunately, it did just kind of abandon that idea though about halfway through. I Got Issues by YG. I really don't have a whole lot to say about this album. It has its ups, its downs. I would say a little more downs than ups. Honestly, I've used this term kind of jokingly before, but really this is such a mid album for me. Very mid-tier. I can't even really say if I'm more, I would say maybe a little more towards disliking it, but not to the extent that I would say that it just wasn't good, period. I'm struggling to find words to really describe my feelings on it other than it was sort of eh. Fair Exchange, No Robbery is a collaboration by rapper Boldy James and producer Nicholas Craven. I think that the production on this album, though at times good, I don't know if anyone else who's heard it felt this way, but it was really distracting a lot of the time with the samples, with the repetition, and also even just with the mixing. I feel like it was just too overpowering and I wasn't really able to concentrate on a lot of what Boldy was saying. And to be honest, even when I did pick up on some of his lyrics and some of his bars, I wasn't too compelled either in that instance, which is a shame because there are a couple moments where like these two really do work well together and I could see the potential of these two guys and what they could come out with. I was not anticipating liking a new Willow album anytime soon. I just haven't really been a fan of her pop punk material as of late, and really just her stuff in general, or what she did with Tyler Cole a couple years back. But here I am having listened to her new album called Coping Mechanism, and it's pretty good. It's a punk punk album from her, a little bit of alt rock, some power punk power pop mixed in there, and it kind of kicks ass, honestly. I think she's a good singer. I think for the most part her vocals do fit this style very well. There were times where it's like she may be going a little too over the top, but yeah, I had a good time with this, surprisingly. It wasn't until re-listening to this album by Quavo and Takeoff that I began to realize it is essentially a one-trick pony. On first listening, I did kind of like it. I enjoyed the simplistic nature of it, but re-listening to it, there really wasn't much else I could get out of it. It's got some bops, it's got a few bangers in there for sure, but not much in terms of substance overall. Only Built for Infinity Links is the title of this one. Being Funny in a Foreign Language by the 1975, weird album title, but overall I did not mind this album that much. I did like the sound of it. I'm liking the Baroque influence here. Just really nice, elegant instrumentation throughout a lot of it that I thought was well done. It's hard for me to get past how redundant a lot of this album was. Like, within the album, tracks later on sounding just like tracks at the beginning of the first leg of the album, as well as a lot of the lyrics not being very good. From the very beginning, it's like real head-scratching stuff. Return of the Dream Canteen is the second release from the Red Hot Chili Peppers this year, their second studio album to come out following Unlimited Love earlier this year, which, for as inconsistent as it was, I thought it was okay. I thought it was actually a decent release from them. This one, unfortunately, though, is much more of a mixed bag for me and much more on the negative side. It's not without some enjoyable moments. I do think that Eddie was a great single and easily one of the better tracks on here, and I like that they experiment a little bit here, in particular with some more electronic sounds, but for me that just straight up didn't work. Sadly, I can't say I'm as into this one. The Car by Arctic Monkeys, an album that I was looking forward to. I liked the lead single, and I liked the sort of different direction they seem to be going in, but sadly this album I thought was mostly pretty boring and just felt kind of sluggish and lazy, even though I think it is pretty well performed by the band and there's some good production throughout. It's a nice sounding album, definitely a pleasant and easy listening experience. I've heard some people saying this about how it's too consistent, which I completely agree with. I think that's easily one of its biggest downfalls. You hear the first track on the album and then you hear it 10 more times. That's pretty much sums up this album. Love for Rent, a new album by Smino, an artist who I think is a very unique voice in the rap world at this moment. And I like a lot of what he's trying to do on here. I like a lot of his ideas, but I gotta say a lot of the execution really fell flat for me. I think especially the features are very overpowering. At times it doesn't even feel like his album. It feels like it's a various artist compilation kind of thing. This was a pretty big letdown for me. I was really looking forward to it and it ended up being very mediocre. Bin Reaper 3 Old Testament by Babytron. This is definitely my favorite album from this guy. From the ones I've heard, this is definitely one I like the most. I really don't know how else to explain it other than it feels like he's trying a bit harder here from the very beginning. It's a little bit more serious. And I like that approach, but at the same time, you do also get a lot of those funny lines and those really corny, cheesy 80s samples that he's so well known for. It's, I think, a good time overall, if maybe just a little bit inconsistent with the quality of the tracks on this thing. Smithereens is the third studio album by Joji, aka Filthy Frank, aka Pink Guy, aka George Miller. While I can't say this album provides much in the way of evolution for Joji's music, I can say that it's pretty good. It's pretty well done. It's kind of sticking with the chill lo-fi theme for the most part, with a decent amount of diversity as well. Obviously you have the piano pop ballad that is Glimpse of Us, even this kind of strange indie rock psychedelic crossover with Dissolve, which I'm actually not that crazy about the track, but I like him trying different things like that. It's short but sweet, and I would recommend this thing. God Save the Rave, this is a collaboration between David Sebastian, DJ Drama being on the project as well, and this David Sebastian guy I think is pretty good, pretty solid. I wasn't completely in love with this. I would say most of the tracks I could have done without, but there were a few that weren't too bad. He has a decent amount of versatility here. Several moments he kind of reminded me of Chance the Rapper. It's hit or miss, but I do think that the hits are good and good enough to at least check those out if you don't want to check out the entire project. I checked out this Fabelmans soundtrack, the score to the upcoming Steven Spielberg film. I just said score and soundtrack as if they were the same thing. This is a score. It's scored by John Williams, which is just amazing to hear, and to think that these guys are still working together after all these years is incredible. And I do find it somewhat difficult to properly critique this, since there are obvious tracks on here that are meant as maybe background towards a particular scene in the film. I've yet to see the movie. I'm actually going to go see it in a few days as I'm recording this. So for that reason, I can't properly, I think, talk about maybe some of my issues with it. I can say that I thought it was nice and I enjoyed some of the pieces here. I think it's a well put together score. Maybe not one of my favorites from John, but overall I think it's well done. The Family by Brockhampton. This was really confusing for me upon initial listen, because it's pretty much just a Kevin Abstract solo project. And it's good. I think it's pretty enjoyable, but even honestly now, with the context of TM being the actual final Brockhampton album, which I have yet to hear, by the way, as recording this, I still do have some of the same issues. I still think that the first half is pretty hit or miss, and just mislabeling it as a Brockhampton album, I can't help but be kind of salty about that. This is just a Kevin Abstract project. I don't know why they didn't call it that. I get the idea of like fooling the fans into thinking all that stuff. I'm still just kind of shook by this whole thing, the fact that there is actually another Brockhampton album out now. It's good, but what the fuck, honestly. Beyond Belief is a collab album by Harry Fraud and 38 Special. At this point, man, I'm starting to lose count of how many of these rapper-producer collaborations I've listened to this year. It's been a lot of them. This one is unfortunately just a little bit forgettable to me. I will say though that there are a couple of good stand-up moments that mainly stem from the collaborations with other Griselda artists, other artists under that label, that I did quite enjoy, but the rest of it, not really that into. Snoop Cube 40 Short is the first studio album by the hip-hop supergroup Mount Westmore. It is composed of all those members you hear in the album title, which is very nice of them. In case anyone is confused as to who's involved with this, just have it right there in the title. I think this does have a pretty decent start to it. I did like some of the tracks in the first half, but as it went on and on, it's over an hour long. I think I just started to get a little bit tired of the formula that this album carries. It at times does play as a pretty nice throwback to West Coast hip hop of the 90s, you know, around the time that Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube were starting to gain relevancy. But other times it feels like they're all trying way too hard to appeal to more of the mainstream hip hop sound, which doesn't go over as well, unfortunately. No Thank You is a new album by Little Sims. This is coming just over a year after her last album, Sometimes I Might Be Introverts. And it is once again another album that has kind of effed up my end of the year album ranking list. This, I think, is just yet another great project from her. It's a lot more chill, laid back, stripped back from the production side of things. Inflows handling all the tracks in here as well. I think he did a great job once again. I'm pretty much always a fan of his work. Sims comes through with some very nice lyricism, some very great penned tunes here. I have very little to complain about with this thing. A couple songs I think maybe drag on a little bit too long, but very satisfied with this thing. Great job, Little Sims. Be That As It May is yet another album from Boldy James. Kunz helming the production on this one. This, I think, is a tad bit better than Boldy's last project. I still, however, feel that it does suffer from some of the same flaws that that one did. The repetitive nature of it. A lot of these songs really start off well and they hook you pretty early, but then there's just really little that's offered beyond that. A lot of these songs are honestly just kind of one-trick ponies that sound cool at first, but don't end up doing much else that interesting or unique. New EP by Saweetie. This one is called The Single Life. This was actually a little bit better than I thought it would be, and I am a little surprised to see just how much slander this thing is getting. I get it to an extent. It's not great. It definitely has its issues, but I think that people are being a little too harsh on her with this thing. I think it's kind of a turn your brain off thing that you can enjoy, at least at parts of it. I think people are just being a little too critical of her. The Fuse is Lit is new EP by Busta Rhymes. I think this thing has some great moments. I really like the first two songs. The next three I'm not all that crazy about. Overall, it's okay. Jupiter's Diary 7 Day Theory is actually the first EP released by Rod Wave, an artist whose appeal I do understand, but personally, I'm not really a huge fan of this guy, although I do think that there are some standout tracks on here where he does show off how good of a singer he is, but most of this, I think, is this kind of generic and unoriginal, kind of a typical blend of pop and trap music.
We used to be good friends a long time ago. And then you stole 100 grand.
RUFFS is the debut mixtape by Kenny Mason. He's had other projects, but this is technically his first mixtape. And with the few songs that I liked on here, I think there is a great amount of potential for Kenny in the punk rap genre. I know he's delved into this previously, but I feel like he could really come out with something really strong if he just stuck with that for an entire project. But unfortunately, those moments are few and far between for me. The rest of this I really didn't care for. He tries to throw in these sort of emo rap influenced hooks and just tunes in general, which I'm not totally against, but in this case, I really don't think it works just because of how out of place it feels. Really, this album is just full of a lot of moments that feel kind of out of place and unnecessary in a weird way. New project by Youngboy Never Broke Again. This one is called 3800 Degrees. It's a new mixtape from him. And I think coming off of his last LP, it's clear to me at least that he's much better in that format, in a studio album structure. Whereas in a mixtape style, the quick, seamless flows of these tracks, I just don't really think plays to his biggest strengths. I will say it's better than I thought it would be, considering just how recent his last project was. He already has another one. Like, for how quick these release dates are coming up, like he's managed to make them at least listenable, even though they're maybe not that great. New Youngboy project. Once again, this guy, at the time I'm recording this, I've heard he already has another one coming out later this week. He's always putting out stuff, so respect there. I would argue, though, that if he took his time more, that the product that would be coming out, and I know that will make some people wince me saying that, but the end results will sound better, because I feel like him just constantly putting out this stuff, it's not always working out too well. I think there's a lot of just filler in here, and I would like to see him take more time with his next release, not including the actual next one, obviously. Also, the title, you call that a family? Westside Gunn comes through again with a new release. This is a mixtape by him titled 10. And honestly, I think this is pretty sick. I think this is easily one of the better mixtapes that I've heard all year. Really into pretty much all the production here. We get guys like The Alchemist and Swizz Beatz creating dope beats, if I may say so myself, quite dope beats. And this also has one of the best and most memorable posse cuts I've heard in a long time. The last track on this thing is absolutely mesmerizing. Really cool project. 3860 is a collaborative mixtape by Quando Rondo and Youngboy Never Broke Again. And I think I have said this before, but I'll say it again. I think Youngboy just puts out way too much music. I get why people like him because he always comes out with music and you don't have to wait too long, but personally I think he really needs to just take his time and not rush these releases, because I feel like a lot of these tracks on here are proof of that. This was very much a mixed bag, but much more on the misses than hits side. He has an album coming out next year sometime, so maybe that'll be a little bit better. I wasn't crazy about this one once again. I think Luck is a fairly well-made movie on the whole. It's got a good message. I do think that kids will get a lot to enjoy out of it. And even with its charming moments and some likable characters, I do just also feel that a lot of this was pretty generic and familiar. And while I do think there's actually some pretty good slapstick humor, slapstick comedy, pretty much all of the other comedy did not work for me, as well as the animation. I mean, some of these people working on this movie are associated with Pixar. Like, this is really lacking in comparison to all the work that Pixar does. Finally got a chance to watch Bullet Train. I am a little bit surprised to see it has kind of a mixed reception towards it. While I do think maybe they tried to stuff too much characters into this story, and a lot of which really don't serve much of a purpose and could have just been scrapped out. Maybe leading to why I also think the film is a bit too long. I liked its setting, how a lot of it just takes place in this one train. It has a cool style to it, some cool action scenes. Just a cool flair and aesthetic going on, being set in Japan as well. Good acting. I enjoyed it. I finally got to see Barbarian, which was nice. You guys may have remembered in my vlog, I was kind of frustrated not going to see that day. This was a trip. This was insane. I don't even know what all to say about it. It was just really freaking crazy. I liked it. I think it was good. I didn't like all the directions it went. I think especially with the conclusion, I was not completely on board with some of that. I thought some of it was a little too over the top. But wow, just such a unique film to come out of the horror genre. Luckiest Girl Alive sees Mila Kunis, I think, giving probably one of the best performances in her career. I mean, I think this is definitely her best since Black Swan. She's really, really good here. And unfortunately, the film surrounding her acting here is fine. I think overall this is a pretty decent movie. But the rest of the acting I found to be kind of hit or miss. The structure of it having these constant flashbacks to her past, I thought worked well at times, but other times not too well, especially with the acting of some of those younger actors. I was down with the story here though, and the message that the film was going for, but at times the way it was put together, it honestly just felt like a direct-to-video or direct-to-DVD kind of movie. Halloween Ends, the so-called ending to the Halloween franchise, at least with Laurie Strode's character involved. That's what I've been hearing. I've heard that that's what Jamie Lee Curtis has been saying. Now, when I did walk out of this movie, I was satisfied, from the way that it concluded. The actual ending part with Laurie and with Michael, I think is pretty well done. And, hats off to David Gordon Green for, I think, closing the curtain with those two characters fairly well. But the rest of this movie really, I think, just doesn't work at all. Bad acting, extremely messy scripts. I mean, Jesus, the randomness of some of these lines and the line delivery is ridiculous. The editing, really not good either. A lot of this just really didn't work, except for, I think, a decent ending. The only reason I even knew who Emmett Till was because of the line in the song Through the Wire, so this was a very informative movie for me, as well as really enjoyable one too. Hard to watch at several times. Just very heavy-handed and really hard-hitting emotional stuff going on. I think the acting was amazing. I thought just overall very solidly put together and very engaging for the most part. Some parts a little bit slow, kind of boring. but I was definitely engaged with most of this and thought it was really good, really well done. I would say I agree with almost everything that everyone has said about Black Panther Wakanda Forever up to this point. I do think that the direction by Ryan Coogler is a little bit better with the action scenes. The drama, I think, is handled a little bit better. Visual effects, of course, all of that has improved, I think, slightly. I would still say that this movie was not quite as enjoyable as the first Black Panther, which is not a movie that I love, but I do think it's a really solid installment in the Marvel franchise. The villain, I think, being pretty good and solid, but definitely not on the level of Killmonger. And props to Letitia Wright. She did a great job, but admittedly, the film is really feeling Chadwick Boseman's absence, unfortunately. I say all this not to downgrade this movie, but just to emphasize the fact that it is just a step below the first Black Panther, I think. Got the chance to see Spirited in a movie theater, not on Apple TV. And I think Ryan Reynolds, Will Ferrell, easily one of the best parts of this film. They really do carry it. Their chemistry, their acting, they're really good, really funny here. The script is a little bit hit or miss at times. I do think it gets a little bit better as the film goes on, and it goes in some unexpected directions that I thought were cool. I was also not expecting this to relate to A Christmas Carol, so that was a pleasant surprise as well. Some decent musical numbers here. Pretty good movie, a fun movie, led by two very likable actors. The Menu is a movie that could have easily been a disaster. It could have been so bad it's good territory, but it works. It works really well due to a lot of things. I think the terrific performances being one of the main things. It's mostly really good blend of comedy, horror, and drama. And amongst other things, I think it also offers really good and smart commentary on the topic of obsession and how us humans tend to get obsessed over little things or particular other humans, and how that could just affect us and the lives around us, people that we care about. Violent Night is an interesting twist on the Santa Claus character and this Christmas Santa Claus story in general, with it being super violent and bloody and gory, but also very comedic at the same time. David Harbour is fantastic in this movie. He is so good as Santa Claus. Not only is he funny, but he's really just, his acting is so good. There are bits of dialogue that he delivers very impressively. I wasn't a fan of all the characters in this movie. There's this one guy that reminds me a lot of Jerry from Rick and Morty. And yeah, just some of the family portrayal I wasn't too into, but overall this is a pretty fun and enjoyable movie though, with some very surprising emotional moments that I was not expecting at all. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish was a surprise to say the least. I didn't see any reason for another film based around Puss to be made. They did the first one a while back and I thought it was okay, but it did kind of seem like a cash grab, especially after the Shrek franchise ending. But man, this is pretty much the best Shrek spin-off film that I ever could have hoped for, especially with this being a sequel to a kind of underwhelming first installment with Puss in Boots. This movie was epic. It was a great character study as well. I mean, it really delves into Puss in Boots's insecurities, whether or not he feels like he's doing the right thing with him being on his last life for the majority of this film. Really impressed with it, honestly. I'm so shocked at how good this turned out. And they say that our healing time may be so. Little Big Boy is a Netflix stand-up comedy special presented by Nick Kroll, who I've liked in the past. I've liked stuff he's been involved with, like Big Mouth, or even his small role in Parks and Rec. And for the most part, this was a pretty satisfying stand-up special for me. If I were to nitpick anything, he at times does these very over-exaggerated physical mannerisms, which every time took me out of the joke. Like, he would say something funny and then he would do this weird thing, and it just didn't work for me almost ever. But I was definitely pleased with a lot of the material here, and I liked also how he kind of told it in a chronological order, sort of, talking about his childhood and then where he's at now, where he's married now and has a kid. I thought it was a cool way to present the routine. Oh, Kid Cudi, new project out. Non-Kid Cudi fans are probably wondering what the hell that was, I was just now doing. But this is a TV special and the album's new tracks from Kid Cudi. Both are titled Intergalactic, both are companions to each other. And overall, I would say this experience was really nice. I definitely was more of a fan of the TV special, which is really just like a movie in disguise. It's 90-something minutes long, but it was really good. Great animation. I like the characters, I like the story. Really enjoyed that one. The album was a little underwhelming initially, but on the whole, I would definitely say it was fine. And looking back, I do like it a little bit more, especially concerning how it fit within the TV special. The Redeem Team is a documentary of sorts covering the 2008 American Basketball Olympics team. Admittedly, this is one that took me a little bit to get into. It does kind of just feel scrapped together and rushed somewhat. By the end of this though, I did actually end up enjoying it quite a bit, and I liked the players that did appear in this and gave their input and talked about their memories from that time and that experience. This also includes one of the lightest flexes I've seen in a while, with this amazing archival footage of games from the 70s, 80s. I mean, it looks fantastic and it's just so casually thrown in there just because. Legacy, the true story of the LA Lakers. I've mentioned before how much I like the Lakers. They're really the only sports team I give a crap about. So I already knew I was going to enjoy this regardless of whatever nitpicks I had with it. Really the only thing I could find as far as issues is that sometimes it does lack focus and sort of focuses on other things not really relating to the team and the organization. But for the most part, very satisfied with this thing, very satisfied with how it was sequenced and kind of broken up with different eras of the Lakers. I would have liked to have maybe heard more about, you know, the Jerry West era, maybe George Mikan as well. I know a lot of those people aren't around anymore, unfortunately. But I mean, just nitpicking here because overall, great time with this. Definitely one I'm going to revisit in the future. Tales of the Jedi, a new Star Wars anthology series on Disney+. Only 6 episodes, 90+ minutes long. I watched it all in one sitting. It's basically like a movie. And I thought it was okay. I think that the quick kind of short storytelling of all these episodes kind of works against the show because, I mean, one of my favorite episodes in here was only like 12 or 13 minutes long, and it just kind of ends abruptly. And I gotta say, by the end of this series, I was struggling to really tell what the point of it all was. It really just kind of feels like a bunch of deleted scenes from the Clone Wars TV show, which is cool and interesting, but I think lacking in substance. Season 6 of Big Mouth, I think, is honestly one of their best seasons to date. A lot of the comedy works really well. Once again, that's been pretty much a guarantee for just about every season up to this point. But in addition, I also liked a lot of the new characters and new ideas that they explored in this season. That's been something that's kind of lacking for me with more recent Big Mouth seasons. But I think particularly what they do with Jessie and her father, the storyline surrounding those characters, was really good and a really good way to develop Jessie's character. There are a few characters that are kind of left out a bit. I do wish the writers did more with some of those other characters, but for the most part, very happy with this one. And like I said, it's one of my favorite seasons of this whole show so far. There you go. That's everything that I watched and listened to from October through most of December for 2022. This video has now come out in 2023, so I hope that your new year so far is going well. And I guess we'll see how the year goes. I don't know, I'm recording this in advance, so we'll see. I'm looking forward to it though. I'm looking forward to just watching and listening to a bunch of new stuff next year and just, you know, kind of starting everything fresh, starting a new albums and movies ranking list and keeping up with them as I go, as I watch and listen to stuff. We're also approaching my 2-year anniversary, I guess you could call it, on this channel. I'm looking forward to that. I don't know if I'm going to do anything for it, to be honest, but if I do, just, I guess, look forward to that day or around that time sometime. I really don't know. I didn't do anything for my 1-year mark, so I probably won't, but we'll see if things change. With all that said, though, thank you for watching any of this. If you did, or even all of it, parts of it, whatever, just thanks for clicking the video, at least. Give me the view. I do appreciate that, so thank you very much. Peace out.